Hello guys and welcome to class.
Sara mo na yan!
This is the science subject and we are working on class number 2 today. Let's start with our presentation and let me show you our topic and end in mind. Our topic is lesson number 2, the water cycle. And our end in mind is the following. Sequence each one of the steps of the water cycle in order to observe and determine this phenomenon in the natural world. Alright, and here we have a summary of the activities that you need to complete. So read lesson number 2, the water cycle, and make a diagram with the main steps of the water cycle and describe each one of them. In addition, take some pictures of the process taking place in the natural world and add it to the final report. So I need you to make this in your notebook, please. Remember that we have a specific format that we need to follow in the science class, which is adding the date, the title, the end in mind for the day. And afterwards, you have to create the diagram that you are being asked to. The diagram about the water cycle. And for the pictures, remember that you need to observe this phenomenon around you. So probably you can go to the roof of your house or to a window to take a picture of somewhere where you can observe the water cycle happening right there. Please print it out and paste it in your notebook. Here you have an example of what the diagram that you have to make has to look like. So just like you can notice right here, you're going to have, for example, an image. You're going to have the title where it says content. But remember that it is also necessary to include a description from each one of the steps of the process that we are learning about today. And please finish on time so you don't have a lot of homework and end up like this guy here. Alright, so let's get started. And, well, we're going to talk about what is the water cycle. It's something pretty simple. The movement of water between the atmosphere, land, ocean, and living things makes up the water cycle. Rain, snow, and hail fall on the oceans and land. On land, ice and water flow downhill. Water vapor moves upwards and is carried great distances by the wind. The wind also creates ocean currents. So, just have in mind that all of the process that water is going through in our planet is basically the water cycle. So when it rains, when all of the water comes down to the ground and also it produces runoff, that's part of the water cycle. When water evaporates and it flows up again, that's part of the water cycle as well. All right, let's continue. So how does water change state? So water on Earth is found as liquid, solid, and gas. Water absorbs energy from its surroundings as it melts from solid to liquid. Water also absorbs energy as it evaporates from liquid to gas or when it sublimates from solid to gas. Oh, let me just go back here. There you go. Okay, so I'm pretty sure that you already know about the states of the matter. So we have liquid, solid, and gas. And let's put this into some other words. So let's suppose that you want to prepare some delicious coffee at home, all right? So you are going to boil some water in order to have hot water to prepare your delicious coffee. Okay, so when you put some water in the pan, for example, where you are going to heat up your water, the water is in liquid form. All right, so what happens if you place it in the stove and you add some fire to it? You're going to start notice that will start heating up, and also you will see some vapor that's coming out. So that vapor is basically water, but in a different stage, which will be gas. All right, or let's suppose that you're going to have a delicious lunch with your family, and you want to drink some delicious Coca-Cola, but a pretty cold Coca-Cola. So you want some ice. So what do you do in that case? You can put some water in the freezer. Then you just let it rest there for a couple of hours. And when you take it out, it's in a solid form. Again, it's water, but in a solid way. The same thing happens in the natural world. And after it goes through different cycles and it interacts with the environment, it will change of the state depending on where you're going to find it at. So that's what you have to observe when you take the pictures for the project that I was telling you about. They're taking pictures of where the water cycle is taking place. So where can you see it in the natural world? We're going to try to move a little bit faster. Water releases energy to its surroundings when it condenses from gas to liquid. And water also releases energy when it freezes from liquid to solid or deposits from gas to solid. No water is lost during these changes of state. That's something very important. The amount of water doesn't vary. It only changes. So let's suppose that you have 1 liter of water and it evaporates, then it's going to be the same liter, but it's not going to be of liquid water, but it will be in the shape of a gas. And if it solidifies, the same thing is going to happen. No water is going to be lost. You will have exactly the same amount. Here you have some of the steps of the water cycle, and it's pretty summarized. So we have some groundwater, as well as different sources of water, such as rivers, lakes, etc. So when the water is exposed to sunlight, it will evaporate and it will start going up. And something that is also important to notice is that there is another similar process, which is transpiration. But in this case, the water is not directly evaporated from lakes, rivers, but it is evaporated from the water that plants expose. So plants start expulsing water, and the water that is on them is going to start evaporating, going up to one of the layers of the atmosphere. And when it reaches the atmosphere, it is going to be interacting with some very cold temperatures. And since all of the gas starts dropping its temperature, it will go through a process that is called condensation, which means that clouds form in the sky. All right, so it will start getting colder and colder and colder until, one more time, the water is going to come from a gas state to a liquid state, generating what we call precipitation. Water comes to the ground, etc. And when the water starts coming down through different streams, like you can see, it's running down the mountain, it's something that we call surface runoff. Then the whole process goes over and over again. Again, we have evaporation, condensation, precipitation, surface runoff, and actually some water is deposited in the groundwater resources that we have around. Okay, let's continue. So, this is me when students can actually describe all the steps of the water cycle. Let's continue. How does water reach the atmosphere? It reaches it through evaporation, when a liquid water changes to water vapor. Most of the water vapor evaporates from Earth's oceans. Curious, right? And water, it reaches the atmosphere as water vapor through evaporation, transpiration, and sublimation. How does water reach the atmosphere? Again, we have transpiration is the release of water vapor into the atmosphere by plants. It's what I mentioned before. Sublimation is when solid water changes directly to water vapor without first becoming a liquid. Sublimation can occur when dry air blows over ice or snow, where it is very cold and the pressure is low. Alright, so here we have a small exercise. Identify each process as evaporation, sublimation, or transpiration. I will ask you to stop the video for a moment and analyze which one of them is evaporation, sublimation, and transpiration. Once you finish and you have identified them, you can keep up with the presentation. So awesome, I guess you are done already. Let's continue. What happens to water in the atmosphere? Condensation is a change of state from gas to liquid. It occurs in the air as clouds, fog, or mist, or on the ground as dew. We also have precipitation. It's any form of water that falls to earth from clouds. Rain, snow, and hail are common forms of precipitation. Again, is related to what I was explaining to you before. After a lot of water is evaporated, it will go to the atmosphere. And since the temperature in the atmosphere is way lower, then the condensation process as well as the precipitation process will take place. Okay, and how does water move on land and in the oceans? Streams, rivers, and the water that flows over land are types of runoff. Runoff flows downhill. Some of the water on land seeps into the ground. This process is called infiltration. Once underground, the water is called groundwater. Groundwater it also flows downhill. All right, here we have an example of what it will look like. And runoff, again, is basically when precipitation comes to the ground, and due to the shape or the inclination of the environment itself, such as the inclination in mountains or the inclination in, let's say, the hills in general, the water will start flowing down. And when it reaches the ground, usually there is a portion of the water that will start getting inside and, of course, going underground. That process, remember, that is called infiltration. And what happens with the water that goes underground? Well, it will be placed in some, let's say, there are like places where water is stored that is called groundwater. Okay? And here we have something that's pretty interesting to analyze. What are the consequences of the destruction of forests? And there are some communities just like the one that you can see right here that are placed at a location that is very inclined. Usually at those locations there are a lot of trees and also a lot of plants. So in normal situations, let's say, when a lot of rain starts coming down, the plants that there are start absorbing all of the water. So if there is a community that is right under or right after the forest, then not a lot of water will get to that specific town because water is being absorbed by all of the plants and all of the trees from the forest. But what happens if humans start destroying the forest that there is? Well, happens what you can see in the picture. Happens that all of the water that was previously absorbed by plants is going to start running freely downhill. And since they are gigantic amounts of water, they can destroy the houses just like there. And this is going to be the people when they see the consequences of destroying the forest.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
All right, so how does water move on land and oceans? We also have glaciers, which may be called rivers of ice, flow downhill and sometimes flow to the ocean where pieces may break off. And winds move ocean water on the surface in great currents over long distances. Cold or salty water will sink in the ocean, forming deep ocean currents that move large amounts of water. That's interesting. I'm going to, well, if I remember, I'm going to show you a picture during our live session. But what happens is that, you know that we have different oceans, right? We have the Pacific Ocean, we have the Atlantic Ocean, etc. But each one of those oceans have a different salinity, a different level of salinity. And if one has a higher amount of salinity than the other, they are not going to mix. And it's something astonishing because you can actually see like a clear line in between both oceans. Like if humans had made something right there, like if humans had built a wall. But in reality, they don't mix because of the amount of salt that they have in their general compounds. And these different amounts of salinity are going to generate ocean currents, which means that water moves in currents around the world, basically. So what does the water cycle transport? The water cycle moves energy and matter. Energy is transported by changes in state and the movement of water from place to place. Matter is transported all around the world by ocean currents, rivers, and glaciers. And what does the water cycle transport? You have identified the process in the water cycle. Okay, so after all of that explanation, stop the video again and identify all of the steps of the water cycle and everything that you can see right there. Not only the water cycle, but all of the hidden processes that there are. And I guess that's it for today. I will see you in the live session so we can continue discussing a little bit more about this. So goodbye, guys, and see you around.
Bye, have a great time.